Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, your home of all things stock, investment, and personal finance related. In today's video, we're pleased to welcome the team from Aduro Clean Technologies. This is one we've covered on the channel previously. Looking forward to having a more traditional Q&A with leadership. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comment section below if you've heard of Aduro Clean Technologies before or you're currently holding shares. With that being said, let's get into today's interview. Okay guys, so that's right. Today's video, we've got the CRO, Chief Revenue Officer, Eric Appelman from Aduro Clean Technologies. This company has been making a lot of headlines. We're looking forward to getting into the details. Eric, first and foremost, welcome to the channel. And if you could give us a quick background on yourself and how you got involved with Aduro.
Yeah, thank you for your time and thank you for having us as Aduro. I'm Eric, I'm 61 years old. I'm from the Netherlands, that's why it is a bit dark on the background here already. I am working with Aduro for the last 2 years. I've had a very satisfying career behind me, starting as a real chemical engineer in Unilever, moving to their bio-based chemicals business. We became ICI. Then I went to become a technical director of the paint company. And in that whole trajectory, it became more and more operating at a customer end with sales, with technical support, with new business development. I went on then to be for 8 years on the board of directors of a Swedish petrochemical company, Perstorp, where I was accountable for innovation, market development, and corporate strategy. And then I came back to the Netherlands, where I was a director of the Brightlands Chemelot campus, which is a breeding ground for the chemical industry for the future. And as you may imagine, the chemical industry of the future is a lot about sustainability. We're trying to attract companies. We were not doing any research ourselves. Bring companies in, bring the energy in around themes like recycling, like bio-based chemistry, around electrification, that sort of thing. And one of the companies that washed up on my desk one day was Aduro, Canadian startup. And they had this interesting, complicated technology on recycling polyolefins, and polyolefins is just the main category of plastic. It's about half of what we make and use. And after a while, I said, "Well, guys, I had already had quite a few of those passing by." I said, "I really believe that you are cracking some of the very fundamental financial challenges that those companies are facing. So welcome to my campus, enjoy." No, all good. 2 years later, time for a change again. I said, you know what? Why don't I do a round by the 4 or 5 most promising startups and see who wants to take me? Oh, I never made it past the first one. That was Aduro. And they said, well, come and join us. And rest is history. Here I am.
Yeah, I don't blame you. It's a pretty exciting company, some great technology, which we'll get into here. Now, on a more macro scale, can you talk to us about the global waste management landscape and where Aduro really sees opportunity here?
Yeah. Let's first say we are talking about plastics recycling, and maybe depict a little bit the challenge first. And mankind makes every year its own physical weight as new plastics. So 8 billion people, let's say we're on average 50 kilograms, maybe, and you very quickly arrive at more than 400 million tons of plastics that we do. Now, some of that plastic is in applications that last very long. I built a new house here, I have some siding and some cabling, and that is made of PVC, and I really hope it's going to be still there in 50 years' time. Not too concerned about that recycling. So that is one category. But there is a lot of plastics that's just used once, and often for a very short time. And the most difficult category is food packaging or packaging in general. That's about half of all the plastics. It's typically polyolefins. It lives for only a couple of weeks, then it ends up in landfill if we don't watch out. And if it is in landfill, you might argue, oh, we took it from the earth, we put it back there. But of course, it's not going to stay there. It's going to become microplastics. It's going to be, in the end of the day, something else. So that is not really nice. And besides, in a country like mine, and the Netherlands, 80 million people on 36,000 kilometers, you're always in somebody's backyard. So no new landfills. Then you might incinerate it. That is actually nice. Then you use the whole carbon twice and get some energy out of it. But you do obviously emit fossil carbon. That is not good for global warming. And again, I'm living here below sea level. If the dikes would break, I'm up until my ears into cold water. I don't want that. We have to do something about that. So what do we do next? Well, you could collect the plastics, melt it up, make a new plastic. But what people often forget is that all that plastic that we throw away is not just one kind. It is about 8 fundamental materials, and then there is a couple of dozen variations. And what does happen if you mix things? The properties of the combination is not going to be that brilliant. You end up typically with low quality products, unless you are able to put your hand on a very pure fraction, or by very good purification can isolate that. I do not know what is achievable, but I would personally be surprised if we could end up doing more than 25% of all the waste plastics by that route. And that leaves us 75% that we have to bring somewhere else, and in comes chemical recycling. And in chemical recycling, you partially break down the plastic back to a feedstock for the chemical industry, and more in particular to the steam cracker. The steam cracker is a huge machine that is the entrance portal for the chemical industry. It turns whatever you feed it into the 5 or 6 elemental building blocks from which we can make anything else. That is where we operate, and that is also probably going to be the most important loop to bring carbon back in the industry. So I think that gives you a bit of a picture of the waste management cycle as we see it in the world.
Yeah, understood. Now you talk about steam cracking. I know you guys just came off a successful pilot scale steam cracking trial. So can you give us a little bit of insight onto that and how that really validates this technology?
Yeah, thank you. That is an excellent question. And it has been sort of what we pushed for, and we were over the moon when we came back with that result. Steam crackers are, as I said, are huge machines. They would typically take 5 million tons of hydrocarbon feed, and that is usually naphtha, which is an oil distillate, or it is some gases, ethane, depending on where you are in the world. And they cost you 2 billion. So what do those things have to do? They have to operate. No interruptions, no disturbances. And as a consequence, the operators of them are very picky as to what they allow in there. Now, that is all good if you take the same good old oil distillate that the world has been making for 100 years plus. But it becomes a bit more tricky if you start to feed it an oil that you got out of waste, because waste is really waste. And maybe I shall go now a little bit further into the 3 to 4 key differentiating factors for Aduro. To deal with that impurity, one thing could be a very defensive one. I am going to select my plastics to death, and I only use the ones that are already pure. And that is the strategy that most colleagues do follow. But it is not very helpful, because if you are very picky, it also means that your pool of material to be recycled becomes a lot smaller. It also means that you're going to reject an awful lot that you still have to find a home for. And it will definitely mean that you are going to end up with something expensive, because whereas waste, as we pick it up, is probably free, and you still have to collect, you have to sort, you have to take care of your rejects, you have washing water, you have everything. So it is not for free. So that tolerance for the input side is a very significant one. And we at Aduro are significantly more forgiving to what we take in. And it has to do with the proprietary chemistry. Now, then we have the stuff on land, and now we're going to try and make something good. And of course, you can make something good. And here I have to become a little bit technical. What we do is we chop up very large hydrocarbon structures. And if you do the classical method, which is a rather brutal thermal treatment, and you just heat the stuff up until it falls apart, that that gives rise to a random mix. You're going to end up with some very small molecules. We call them fuel gas. The only thing you can do is burn them. Then you have a fraction that is sort of smallish, but quite nice for a steam cracker. For the ones that are known to the art, carbon ranges from C5 to about C20. And then you have stuff that is still bigger than that C20, too big to feed a steam cracker. It doesn't like it. It has to go somewhere else. You might do some recirculation loops, but that is all costly. And very often people who make too much of that end up sending it back to a refinery. Then the refinery will turn it into fuel. That is not too bad, but especially in Europe, we will only get recycling credits if the stuff really ends up in new plastics and not into a car engine. So that's selectivity. Incumbents, typically, if they do it well, 70% yield of the right stuff. We make 85 plus. And that is a huge difference because not only do you have more to sell, but you also need less capex to do it into, and you have less material that you have to reject. So all good. Then we have the oil, and then the oil of the classic thermal processes is actually not that nice. It does require quite a bit of purification and upgrading. And upgraders have been built already. And it is obvious that this treatment, it's called hydro treatment, is not going to be cheap at all. It costs you several $100s per ton. Now, if you realize that a typical fossil naphtha, you can buy that for $600-700 a ton, any $100 that you let slip is going to cause you a competitiveness issue. So those are the three fundamental advantages that we do have. And that is how we position ourselves, how we would like to bring that forward. And that is going to make it, because in the end of the day, and I think we talked about it a bit before, the story that I bring to conferences at this moment.
Yeah, very insightful. Now, in terms of turning that technology into revenue, as the Chief Revenue Officer at Aduro, what is the strategy to monetize, to turn this waste into profit or dollars for the company?
If you're bringing a new technology like this, there is two ways to make money. And one is to do it yourself and to build a facility. And the other one is to convince others to build it and charge them a license fee from it. Now, the industry that we are providing this technology with, petrochemical industry, is conservative. They will want to see it. What is for us now happening is we are rapidly scaling. Some people that have followed us may have noticed that we have assembled our continuous pilot plant. And that is a mini version of the process as we would like to have it. It is not producing commercial quantities yet. This is where you would try all sorts of dirty raw materials that you get from various corners in the world. But they have also probably seen that we have announced that we're taking steps towards the so-called demonstration factory. And a demonstration factory is something that operates already on a quasi-commercial scale. Think of thousands of tons of input per year. And that will already generate stuff that you can sell. And while it is generating a revenue for us as a company, two things will happen. One is that bigger companies say, "Oh, well, okay, it is now running for a while, and we find that now trustworthy enough to take a license." Or we might say it ourselves and build a second and a third plant. So there's two ways here to revenue. And the crucial step is that we get a demonstration plant ready, and that is why we have taken our steps. We can accelerate it considerably because the design of our process has the nice coincidence that it is very much like Lego, where the individual blocks are off-the-shelf equipment of which the scaling rules have been known for decades. And so we can considerably accelerate that phase by sticking to things we already know.
Now, with that being said, now that you've got some demos or tests under your belt, how would you say this really validates the company in terms of some of these large petrochemical players around the world?
Now, as I said, what they will do is they will look at your track record with your demonstration plant. So, and when they feel comfortable enough, and it might be the petrochemical company itself, it might also be an engineering company that is used to license out technologies and says, hey guys, we want to be your friend. Let's do this together, and then let me bring you my competences. Those are the ways. But it is all about evidence. And the petrochemical industry and people who have driven past those installations will probably recognize it if I say huge scale, very expensive installations, high temperatures, high pressures, safety issues. There might be dangerous chemicals. And they do not take prisoners as it comes to reliability, safety, and also on margin. So the industry will take its time, and that is characteristic for the chemical value chain. It is not an industry that moves by the day. It moves by its time. It will have its evidence. What is important for us is that we do generate revenue along the way, and that is what we will be doing.
Excellent. Now, I covered Aduro about a month ago on the channel. Since then, I've seen a number of high-profile social media accounts, press releases, a lot of information, excitement about the organization. You guys were also just featured on Earth with John Holden. Can you talk about some of these recent kind of press engagements?
Yeah, well, it is important that you let the world know that you are there, that you're making progress. And what I try to do is bring an honest and consistent message, where you say, okay, what is the story? The story is that we want to deliver a technology that will recycle plastics at a meaningful scale with a meaningful yield, and that we will be able to pay our bills. What that does take, it does take hard work. It does take that you go through that scaling process. That will take its time. That is just inevitable. On the other hand, we also have to make sure that we integrate into the value chain. And that is, for instance, why we have this week actually signed a very significant collaboration agreement with a group that is called ECOSIM, a Mexican association of branded goods companies that have decided to accept an EPR scheme. An EPR is Extended Producer Responsibility Scheme. That is where those people that put plastics in the market as a shampoo bottle or a wrap for or a bread bag or something like that, pay up front to collect it. Now, that is all good and well, then the stuff is there collected. And if they then could find a nice home for what has been collected on their behalf, they might actually get some of the money back. Now, that is an important one. And that is another important thing, is that you build multiple links and that you tell that to the market. So we have been talking about how we have been working with Shell and Total, and those are public things. Here we are talking about screening our technology, and I can tell you they are tough questions. And you have to answer them. You sometimes kick back to the lab and say, how does that work? But it is also about who is going to use it, who is actually going to take it into. So it is a multi-dimensional space where we operate, where we have to communicate. And the regulatory dimension is very important. It's extremely exciting, but it does mean that we keep our investors with us by telling. And then, of course, also keep reiterating what your message is. And in our case, that is hard work. It is about execution. It's about getting your hands dirty. As I told you before, I was in Mexico last week and did not spend too much time in fancy hotels and conference halls. I was actually visiting waste dumps. Wading through plastics, although actually they do a very good housekeeping job, but wading through plastics, talking about the streams that today do not have a home yet. And actually, a very interesting one is every kilogram that you don't find a home for is a cost. So if you're working for a higher yield, you're also working for a lower yield of garbage that will cost you money. So this is sort of a two-edged sword. So very vital to be out there and to talk about the real practical problems. And that is what we talk, and that's what we want to share. You might even, with the big words, say it is also about sharing the values, which is getting your hands dirty, get down to the real issue, deliver, execute. Don't use too many big words. Just do the things that have to be done.
Yeah, I love that. Out there getting your hands dirty. Now, you talked about the growth, the execution over 2025. I wanted to give you the opportunity to close out here and maybe talk about some of the exciting catalysts on the horizon for 2026.
Yeah, oh, thank you for that. And again, it comes back basics. Do your thing. You know from our publications that we have our pilot plant. It's now assembled. It is ready to start almost, I think. And one thing that we must do in 2025 is sweat that asset. As I said, it's not going to generate sellable volumes, but this is the machine where we will try all the different feedstocks, because believe me, waste is not the same. It depends on how easy it is to treat. There are parts in the world where labor is cheap and where you can do excellent hand picking, but there is also many parts where you can't. There is parts in the world where mechanical recycling is extremely sophisticated, leaving only really bad garbage for us. There's other places where it is like that case. Now, we have to understand that. We have to take in these different raw materials. We have to see what it does when you run a little bit longer than just an hour or two, how it actually fouls up your installation, where it may cause wear on your equipment, that sort of thing. So that and other things is going to be what we have to do on the pilot. Big thing. The other half of scaling is already looking at the next step, the demonstration plant. We have announced it, that we're taking the first steps. Here you're talking about acquiring a site, you're talking about permitting, you're talking about ordering long lead items, things that do not happen 1 week to the other. But you have to better start now to make sure that it's going to be finished in some moment that is convenient to you. So that's the other big item that is going to be very important for us. Apart from that, we are, of course, a knowledge company. We are sitting on a true discovery that has multiple facets. Some of you may remember that Aduro initially worked more on breaking down bitumen molecules. They are not too different from plastics, actually. They have the unpleasant habit of being quasi-solid and difficult to transport. Well, if we could break them down, it is an example about how our technology can be applied in multiple areas. And one of our missions will be to continue discover new places where we can use it. And 1 year you make 3 inventions, another year you make only 1, but that is still an important focus. Yeah, so those are 3 things that you are going to see. But I think the overwhelming and important thing is show that we scale, that we do this thing, that we find the raw materials, by the way, that we build those partnerships. That is what you shall expect and demand from us.
Great. Yeah, I mentioned to you earlier, I have 2 little kids with my wife and I, and it's great to hear companies that are really cleaning up the world for those future generations. Very incredible technology you guys have. I would encourage you guys to take a closer look at Aduro. I've linked the company website in the video description below. If you have any additional questions for Eric and team, feel free to leave them in the comment section. Hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. We'll see you back here tomorrow.